Oh, she definitely didn't approve, but that's okay. No. Vegetarian would be great.
All right, so we're going in 10. All right. We're going in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Good evening, Chesterfield County. Thank you for taking time tonight to join us in the first of our 3 budget information town hall sessions. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule tonight to join us. We're honored to have you here as we take a deeper look into our proposed budget for the 2021-22 school year. Last night, our superintendent, Dr. Merv Doherty, presented his proposed budget to the school board. And during the next 6 weeks, our school board will dig deeper into the proposal, looking at the various proposals within, receiving reports, and presentations over the course of 3 weeks in terms of work sessions, and continue to receive public input in the form of tonight's town halls, as well as comments submitted to CCPS info and via social media. Part of that process includes helping inform and educate the public. So we're happy that you're here with us tonight so that we can do that. This is obviously a very critical moment in the history of Chesterfield County Public Schools. We have a lot of needs. We have a lot of resources that support our children. And so we're happy that you're joining us here tonight so that we can talk about those. Again, we're here tonight to learn more about the operating budget for the 2021-22 school year, the proposed operating budget. Over the course of the next several weeks, our school board will work up to an adoption and an approval of the operating budget, which will then go to the Board of Supervisors for review and final funding. At that point, the school board's operating budget will come back and it will be adopted for the 2021-22 school year. Again, we appreciate you being here with us tonight so you can learn more about the budget and learn how we can rally together to support public education in Chesterfield. We do realize that there is a lot of interest in current events that are ongoing right now. However, tonight's focus will be on the operating budget. We believe it's that critical. It is what will carry us forward into the next school year. And so we're going to be responding to the questions posted on social media and already submitted that deal with the budget. If you have other questions, please feel free to send them to ccpsinfo@ccpsnet.net. You'll notice that we're up here tonight, socially distanced, 1 per table, 6 feet apart. And unlike other town halls that we've held over the past 3 months, tonight we will continue to respond with our masks on. We do want to model what our expectations are in our classrooms when our students return. And so we're going to be doing and following the same mitigation strategies that we'll be employing in our schools. If you need an accommodation for if you are hearing impaired and you need to, please don't forget that our Facebook channel and our YouTube channel has a closed captioning function within, and you can follow this conversation that way. And with that, without any further ado, we're going to get started tonight. I'll start with our introductions, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Harder for some opening comments. To my right, which is your left, we have our Chief Financial Officer, Bob Meister. Next to Bob is our Superintendent, Dr. Merv Doherty. Next to me is our Matoaca District School Board Representative, Mr. Ryan Harder. And we are here tonight. We have invited specifically the Matoaca District, but we welcome all in Chesterfield County to learn more about our budget opportunity. Seated next to Mr. Harder is our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Thomas Taylor. Next to Dr. Taylor is our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Sharon Pope. And next to Dr. Pope is our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Josh Davis. Thank you all for taking time tonight to join us. This is the first of 3 of these, so we'll get used to each other over the course of the next several days. Again, our agenda for this evening is some opening remarks from Mr. Harder, then Dr. Doherty and Mr. Meister will get into the budget presentation. Those of you who have already taken a look at it, have no fear. We've taken some of the slides out. It is no longer 107 slides. We do want to leave time at the end to make sure that we get to your questions. So without any further ado, Mr. Harder, if you'd like to kick us off.
Thank you, Tim. I'd just like to thank everyone at home that's watching this evening. This is the time of year in January and February where we start to look at our operating budget for the next year. There's obviously a lot of needs and wants, and the superintendent compiles that and then brings it to the school board. Over the next couple weeks, we're going to look at all the initiatives and funnel and find the best way to make sure that we're spending taxpayer dollars as appropriate as possible, and fully funding our educational piece. So with no further ado, Dr. Daugherty.
Thank you, Mr. Harder, and welcome everyone. We have an opportunity to go through this brief presentation, but first of all, we have two priorities for our budget for this year: addressing teacher compensation and meeting the needs of our students and staff. We have outstanding teachers in our school district, and even through this pandemic, they have done a fantastic job and continue to work. And we do know that as we continue to look at our school district, our diverse learning populations, that instructional needs, social emotional needs, mental health needs, as well as we look at the things that we excel at with our students academically, need to be addressed. So as we look at the system a little closer, just some things to let you know. One, we are a very diverse learning community. We are a majority school district at this time. So from 20 years ago to today, you can see from the chart here that our population has changed greatly, and it will continue to change as a fantastic melting pot for not only what Chesterfield is, but what for our country looks like. So when you look at this diverse learning population, since 2010 to now, so over 10 years, we've increased our low-income population by 55%. We've increased our English language learners 141%, and our special ed population has increased 9%. And each of these areas, even though they've increased, no matter what percentage, the amount of funding that's needed to meet the needs of the students has continued to grow. And look at not an ordinary classroom, but look at the needs of meeting the needs of all students to address their academic needs, their social emotional needs, and their health needs, that we may continue to help them no matter what zip code they come from. They will get a quality education in Chesterfield County. You know, when you look at in Chesterfield County, if you're a family of four and you make $34,000, you qualify for our free lunch program. So when you think about the data of 38%, and we expect to be at 40% coming this school year, we have more students than Richmond Public Schools has in total enrollment just in the poverty area of free and reduced lunch. And so we look across our county, and this issue is in every magisterial district. And we feel that it is our responsibility to meet the needs of our students, to give them an equitable opportunity to have a great education in Chesterfield County. And looking at our challenges ahead. So we know that when we go from person to person instruction, and we know that we've been out of school for in somewhat 10 months for a lot of our students, it's almost 11. And once we return, we know that we'll be dealing with a division of students that have not been around each other, that have social and emotional issues, that have academic loss, that will deal with concerns for mental health that we want to respond to. And we appreciate the Board of Supervisors and the county executive last year for helping us meet the needs of our staffing issues that we had to address, looking at the help with these issues in counseling and ELL and et cetera. But these issues still occur, and we still need to press forward in helping our students. You know, more language. We have more students that are speaking other languages. We have 101 languages in our school system right now. Our special ed population with advanced IEPs now, and looking at the needs of students with disabilities, has continued to increase and continue to have an expense that we can help our students academically and physically as well as emotionally meet their needs in school. And we know that we're going to deal with the health and wellness of our students, being out of school, not having PE, not having a lot of activities going on. There's been an isolation, and we want to make sure that our students will be able to excel and get used to back to an environment of safe and learning issues that go on in our schools. We know that mental health concerns are important, and we've been counseling students through this past 11 months, but we know that the face-to-face time will be extremely important, that when you think all of the issues that our students deal with, especially with trauma-informed care that we've been training our staff on for several years, we want to make sure that we can address the issues, make sure they get the appropriate help that's needed, if it's in school or out of school, that we can help them in any way possible. You know, we want to make sure that we have high-quality teachers. And to have high-quality teachers, we must be competitive in the market. And you're going to see through our presentation that we are not competitive in the market. And, you know, when you think about the quality that goes on in Chesterfield County, the excellence goes on with having 100% of our schools accredited, the amount of scholarships that occur for our students leaving our CT programs and leaving our schools, finding high-paying jobs, and looking to be outstanding citizens of our community. We believe our teachers do an outstanding job, outstanding professionals, and we do not want to lose our outstanding professionals to other school divisions. And you'll see that we have differentiated support for our schools, that if each of us were a school up here, each of us would have different needs for our students and our staff, and we want to make sure they have the resources in their schools to meet those needs. So let's look at the objectives and balance them. So again, you're going to hear this over and over again. Our number one priority is addressing the teacher decompression. And we really appreciated the Board of Supervisors and the county executive for reaching out, paying for a study from an independent agency to look at this issue and have a plan to look at this over the next 3 years. So we want to thank them for moving ahead and helping us address this issue of teacher compensation and meeting the needs of our students and staff. And we know that this is an extremely important issue, and we're going to continue to talk about this and press forward with these issues. So many will look at this budget and say, well, why are you placing a budget that will far exceed what you think you're going to get from the county? And in Virginia Code Section 22.1-92, it says that the superintendent will submit a needs-based budget, funding to the school board. So if you read this, it says it shall be the duty of each division superintendent to prepare with the approval of the school board and submit a governing body or bodies appropriating funding for the school division. So my responsibility is to show the needs of the school district. The school board, over the next 3 weeks, will vet this information, and then they will submit a budget that they are comfortable with going forward to the Board of Supervisors and the county executive. And so we know that the local composite index, the LCI, is unchanged. And that meant that last year, the state recalculated all LCIs, and the LCI is the value of your economic wealth in your school division, in your county, and what the county can or should pay in those areas, and to help us meet the standards of quality. So the LCI is unchanged from last year, and only in the second year in the biennium. So we know that the following objectives have not changed from last year. So we submitted the budget last year, and we had a significant amount of needs because one of the things that has happened since 2008, 12 years, we have not recovered from the issues that happened with the housing market issue of 2008, and so we're trying to still recover from that time period. And again, it's been 12 years. So if we thought they were important last year, they are important this year. So we know that there's a national teacher shortage. We know we're still recovering from the housing market crash of 2008. And we know there's only so much money that's out there. And we're not looking to do anything with taxes or deal with that. We just believe that the funding is available right now to meet the needs of our school system. And we know that very little costs the same as it did 10 years ago when you think about the time frame here. So why should we still consider having a budget for a school system that may be antiquated in the sense of timing of funding needs, and we can't be competitive in the market for our teachers, our drivers, our service workers, everyone in our school system who's employed should be compensated and compensated correctly into the marketplace that we live in. So we know that we have mandates and requirements. We have to follow compliance with federal laws. We have compliance with state laws. We have to deal with staffing issues and compliance issues to meet the needs of our students and learning. And some of the requirements don't match expectations. Example, staffing levels of schools. We do not want to meet the minimal standard. We want to exceed the minimal standard so we have the support that's needed. And the best example, when you think about supporting schools, is I'll use the example of a school in 2016, Ettrick Elementary School, that did not meet the standards. It was not accredited. And because there was funding available to meet the requirements to help them give additional staff to meet the needs for the students, in a 2-year period, they became a National Distinguished Title I school. That's unheard of in education today in a two-year period. And we believe that all of our schools, when they need the assistance, should be able to get the staffing needs to make sure that we have academic success for all of our students. So, when you think about compensation, and you're going to hear a lot about compensation over and over again, that the average annual teacher salary in Virginia is $53,267. Virginia ranks 33rd in the nation in salaries. And so that means they're a little over $9,000 below the national average. And this is not acceptable, especially in Chesterfield County, when we do not meet those standards at all. So when you think about a first-year teacher in Chesterfield, they make $45,792. And when you look at the national average, it's $61,730. A teacher in Chesterfield County is not paid the national average until 31 years of service. And these issues for the standards of pay must change because we are not competitive in the market, and we will be discussing that today. So right now I'd like to turn this over to Bob Meister, our CFO, and he's going to explain some of the budget numbers.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today about what is actually in the budget. Before we get there, I'd love to talk a little bit about how Chesterfield County Schools, as it says here, stacks up. First of all, let me mention that we are a really large business. We have a $700 million operating budget, over 7,500 full-time positions, 9 million miles traveled by our buses, and 6 million meals ultimately that we serve annually. So we are a large business operating off of a $700 million budget. If you look at that a little bit deeper, you take a look at those costs on a per pupil basis and compare those to both the state average and other communities that are like Chesterfield. You can see, we'll start with administration, attendance, and health. This is essentially central office staff. In Chesterfield, $404 per pupil, state average $707. You can see you can look at this one of two ways: incredibly efficient at what we do, and therefore able to deliver quality results from the central office for a shoestring, essentially, or you can be a little bit disappointed and say, hey, there's so much more we can do if we lean into this a little bit more. Operations and maintenance, similar story here. We have an aging infrastructure. We have great folks on the ground really keeping those buildings clean, safe, etc. But they do it for $874 per student, well below the state average of $1,200 and well below most other districts in the comparable here. Pupil transportation, this one we look a little bit better on. We look middle of the pack here. Still below the state average, but we have leaned into this area over the past, including providing some new buses, some new technology, et cetera, into transportation. So we stack up relatively well on this dimension, still below state average, however. Instruction. These are bodies in the classroom and your folks in the schools. Here you see again, near the bottom, $8,000. State average, $9,700, $9,800, well below. Chesterfield is well below that state average. Again, what great results, 100% accreditation, great education experiences for our kids, but we're doing that at $8,000, largely on the back of fantastic teachers who are doing yeoman's work at a pay, quite frankly, that isn't competitive, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but you can see here, $8,000 as compared to $9,700 state average. You put those various components together, it adds up to something the state calls regular day school. You can see here we're pretty much at the bottom of the pack, slightly ahead of Stafford, but well below that state average of almost $12,500. We said just a hair under $10,000 per student, per pupil. Clearly an opportunity to be prideful in this. We're using your tax dollars really, really efficiently and effectively given our return, but there's so much more we can do for our staff and students if we look to move this just a little bit higher. Last slide I'll talk about on our comparison here is looking at how much funding we receive from our locality, this would be Chesterfield County, versus essentially other districts. You can see Chesterfield here hovers right around $4,000 per pupil from the county. Other comparables go up as high as $6,000, $7,000. You can see the state average there, about $6,500 per pupil based on the contribution from their local communities. Slightly ahead of Norfolk, but generally below most others in the comparable. Gives a little bit of a head nod that maybe Chesterfield County could do more. So once again, our focal points. You've heard Dr. Doherty and others talk about this slide a few times already. I'll just reiterate. We're here to talk about what our needs are, and we believe our top priority is, as it was last year, really addressing teacher decompression and leaning in to help support decompression. Of course, meeting the needs of our students and staff, and I won't reiterate the comments that Dr. Doherty already made, remain important as well, and we'll continue to lean in and invest in those as well. But as we look at this budget, clearly addressing teacher decompression is the top priority. One thing as we think about this and what this looks like, teaching is the profession that creates all other professions. What a great quote, and just something to ground us on the importance of what those fantastic teachers do every day. They're out creating the future leaders, the future U.S., right? So let me take a moment and walk you through a few slides on the salary compression study and what that showed. Again, thank you to the county for helping support that study and looking at the results here. So first thing we note is that starting pay is relatively close to market average. So we feel okay at the start, but as a teacher's career progresses, we get further and further away from what we'll call market average here. So over a 35-year career, a CCPS teacher with a master's degree will earn about 10% less than the market average. 10% less over the course of a 35-year career, depending on a few factors, is around $240,000. So that's a lot of money over the course of a career to be leaving on the table, if you will, to work in Chesterfield, given our current pay scale. This is not just a teacher issue. We looked at other areas as well, and they lag as well. We'll look into those. We've got a multi-phase process to address more than just teachers. We'll talk a little bit more about teachers being the really the lifeblood of the organization here. Another thing we did as part of this study is we talked to our teachers and asked them a few questions in a survey, and what we learned is, why do teachers come to work for Chesterfield, right? It's two things pop to the top of that list. It's location and the reputation of the school district. Salary, not among the top three. Why do teachers stay in Chesterfield? The great coworkers, the teachers they work with, their administrators, etc., as well as location were the two most cited reasons. A meager 5% of respondents said they stay because of salary and pay. Lastly, why do teachers leave Chesterfield County? This is where pay and salary pops to the top. Better salary and opportunities for a better salary were the top two reasons, and 80% plus of the respondents who have recently left cited pay as the major reason. So you can see from this slide in this study, why do people come? Why do people stay? It's because of the community and the people they work with. Why do people leave? It's pay. So let's look at that a little bit deeper, right? So this is one particular pay lane that was studied in the survey. This is the master's pay lane. As you look at this, you'll see the green line. That is our current pay structure at Chesterfield County. You can see it starts right around $48,000, $49,000, stays relatively flat for the first 15, 16 years of the career before it starts to increase. The market average, you see a much more sort of, I'll say, normal path up through the chain. And that gap there, that is that $250,000, $40,000 that I was talking about before that your Chesterfield teachers are sacrificing. So a few more numbers around that, looking back at what this pay scale looks like in those first 10 years. In those first 10 years, that's where 2/3 or so of our teachers are. And within those first 10 years, or even the first 7 years, we'll lose about half of our teachers in those first 7 years. So making sure we're paying competitive salaries and providing appropriate increases over those first handful, 5 to 10 years, is really important for retention and ensuring our teachers are compensated appropriately. Looking at a few numbers, a first-year teacher salary, you heard Dr. Doherty talk about this earlier, is just a hair under $46,000. 5 years later, it is $47,000, 3% more. Another 5 years later, it is only $48,600. So over a course of 10-year period, 6% higher. Obviously way less than a 1% increase every year, barely, not even covering inflation, cost of living adjustments. So what did the results of the study say? What was their recommendation? You can see here they provided that recommendation over 3 phases. The first phase really looks at, first of all, minor adjustments in the starting point. I mentioned that we're relatively close at the start. There is some adjustments recommended to start, but the big piece of this particular first phase that we're looking at this year is addressing that scale. This is about putting teachers on that appropriate pay scale right now. And what that looks like overall is about a 6.2% increase in teacher salary on average. That's a pretty big deal. If you look at phase 2 and phase 3, we continue to address different phases of compression. We continue to move teachers up the scale as they should and start to offer better, even more competitive starting salaries as well to ensure that we're really attracting great teachers. And again, not listed on this slide would be a phase 4 that the group didn't study, which is all the other great associates that work at Chesterfield County. Again, this study captured about 4,700 folks, largely teachers and school-based personnel. What this didn't cover was folks like food service workers, bus drivers, central office staff, handful of other positions that are incredibly valuable as well, not addressed here. And given the state of affairs, we know we need to address those, and we'll look at those as a part of phase 4 as we roll forward. That all sounds great. As a finance guy, you have to scratch your head and say, okay, how much is this going to cost? This is the price tag, right? This is the register receipt. Year 1, I mentioned most of this is teacher. You can see school administrators, professional support, and paraprofessionals as well. This is a $23.2 million price tag. This is real money, and this is really important to our teachers and to the district in order to keep those going. I must also reiterate that this isn't a one-time expense. This is $23 million this year, next year, and the year after. Should we do phase 2 and phase 3, that number gets higher as we go forward. So as we think about this, this isn't about providing a little extra incentive this year in terms of bonus. This is about providing a long-term answer to this pay struggle. So moving away from the pay study, I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about that in Q&A, but another really critical aspect of this proposed budget and this needs-based budget is really looking at differentiated support and differentiated staffing. The first piece of this is differentiated support. So we're going to ask for about $3 million in FY22 to provide differentiated funding to our schools based on a new weighted formula that addresses needs of those schools. So this would include additional funding for things like special education students, English language learners, and students living in poverty, with a little extra to those schools to help, quite frankly, level the playing field. So you ask, what does that look like? That all sounds great. A few examples here on the slide just to share with you. I'll walk through the Bensley and Weaver elementary comparison. I'll leave the slide up for a minute so you guys can absorb the rest of it. But for Bensley and Weaver, as an example, the allocation of funding from the central office to those individual schools was about $35,000 for Bensley and about $43,000 for Weaver, based on their projected enrollment of about 597 and 621. So relatively close. These are schools that look very different if you were to look at them from the lens of equity, right? If you look at Bensley, a much greater economically disadvantaged population, ELL population, et cetera. So what you do is you look at this new formula and you make sure that they have additional resources to meet those needs of those students, right? So what this looks like for Bensley, from their allocation in FY21 of about $35,000. With these adjustments, we'll increase that by $41,000 to $76,000. Weaver, we know they have needs as well. I'm not trying to say that they don't. They'll go from $42,000 to $57,000. So they'll get a $15,000 or $14,000 increase as well, looking to address both the fundamental problem of not having enough money in the schools to do things like ensure teachers have Kleenex on their desk or whatever it may be, help with supplies, help with other items that are really crucial to that day-to-day operation of the schools, and to make sure we do that in an equitable way so those schools that have more needs, in this case, example, Bensley, are really leaned into and we're providing more support there. You see a similar dynamic with middle school and high school examples here. I won't walk through each of those. You'll see the full list of those as part of our budget discussions as we go forward. The other big piece of the differentiated model is staffing. Dr. Doherty and the staff is requesting $1.5 million in FY 2022 to do just that, to provide differentiated staffing for schools that need it, whether that be for academic, social, emotional, mental health needs, etc. Why do we want to do this? Quite frankly, because it works. You heard Dr. Doherty talk a little while ago about the example of Ettrick Elementary School. Remind you of that. In 2016, they were denied accreditation. An earlier version of this differentiated funding was put in place for Ettrick. We leaned into that school, and in just 2 short years, in 2019, they were a National Title I distinguished school. As Dr. Doherty said, that's unheard of. That's fantastic. That's because we were able to lean in and provide differentiated support for Ettrick. And what we'd like to do is continue the momentum on that with this particular initiative to ensure that we continue to stay above the curve for each of these schools. So that brings us to, okay, all nice, talk to me about the numbers. What does the needs-based budget really look like? One thing to remember, this funds our operations for 21 and 22. There are a few other pockets of dollars. There's a capital improvement plan, which we'll talk about in other forums. There is a food service budget. There's a few other means for dollars. We're talking about the nuts and bolts, the operations of the school here, and really looking to meet all the state and community expectations, as well as to serve our teachers and our students as we move forward. Let's start with revenue. A lot of numbers on this page. I wouldn't be a CFO if I wasn't putting a presentation together without a table of numbers. This is my numbers table for you today. I'll have one other later. But let me walk you through this. So the first row, it's labeled transfers. So this would be monies we receive from the county. You can see last year, or this current fiscal year, just under $312 million. Early indications from the county suggest that that will increase by $8.2 million, about a 2.5% increase over last year to $319.9 million. Local sources, this is monies that CCPS itself generates through various fees in schools and other places. This we expect to go down close to $1 million, largely because of the lack of Chromebook fees that we are no longer charging as a district. State funds, they come in 2 buckets. One is the traditional state monies to address SOQs, etc. That's the first line. Sales tax is the other line. We get a share of your state sales tax. Between the 2 of those, we're looking at close to a $10 million increase in funding from the state. And within this is a couple of asterisks. One, this is the proposed budget from our governor. They're still going through negotiations on that, and that won't be known for certain for a little while yet. So we'll take this with an asterisk until we hear that final number from the governor. And this does include some provisions that are favorable to the schools, including a hold harmless provision for our membership numbers. That is really important that we see that continue to be put forward by the governor and by the state. Last are several smaller buckets of funds that decreased on the margin. You add it all up, it's about a $16 million increase, which on its surface looks like a nice size increase over 703. But when you look at the needs that we're going to put forward to you and some of the non-discretionary increases that you see in any given year, it quickly becomes apparent that that's just, quite frankly, not enough. And we'll need to continue to look at other ways to continue to increase. So I mentioned that this wasn't enough. What does that mean? You can see on the left is the revenue picture, a summary of the page I just talked about that mentions the 16 million increase. On the right side is what I'll spend the bulk of the rest of the time talking about, which is the expenditure side. We are looking at an expenditure increase on our needs-based budget, including non-discretionary increases. These are things that are largely contractual or maintaining services that currently exist. The compensation study and other enhancements that we think are critical. I mentioned two of them already, which is a differentiated funding and support. You put all those together, it equates to about a 55.6 million increase year over year. Net those two together, that equals about a $39.6 million deficit that we have to look at really hard and make sure that we can address. It's important to note we recognize that there are fiscal realities. We don't sit here expect money to sort of fall from the sky for this to come through. We've got some hard decisions to make. We have to look within this budget. Mr. Harder talked about that earlier. We need to ensure that what is here is truly need, and we'll have to talk with county, state, other agencies, making sure that we've looked under every rock we can to make sure that we can fund everything that we can. And you heard Dr. Doherty talk in the board meeting yesterday that really ensuring that we land that compensation study, the 24-25 million, is really his top priority, and I believe it's the board's as well, to ensure that that is part of this budget, and we'll ensure that we'll do everything we can to make sure that happens. But let's take a moment and talk about those expenditures. But before we do that, one other slide I forgot. This is really important as well. We have about a $24 million, what we call a fund balance at the county. This is dollars that we returned to the county in this particular, or last calendar year, from largely savings and unappropriated funds from last year. During the course of the pandemic, other things are reasons why we, quite frankly, spent less than we might have otherwise. That money is not allowed to be kept on the school's books. We must return that to the county at the end of the year, but it is ours with the board's approval, like any other budget, to use. So we need to be smart about this. This is one-time dollars. I wouldn't look at this 24 million and say just put it against the 39 and change, because one-time versus ongoing expenses are something that's really important that we'll need to keep in mind as we go through this process. But we do have a material fund balance that is sitting at the county that we could tap into to help ensure that at least part of that gap is closed. So now we'll look at the expenditures. As I mentioned, I'll talk about them in three buckets. One is compensation, one is non-discretionary expenses, and the other one is enhancements. Staff compensation, $23.2 million. I spent a little bit of time on that earlier in this discussion. This would be phase one, right? This would be the addressing the teacher salaries, as I talked about earlier. There are three phases after this that we'll address as we go forward in later years. I mentioned that study only addresses about 2/3 of our associates, the teachers and others. I want to make sure that we are putting forward a cost of living adjustment of 2% for those folks not covered as part of the study here. So that would be about $2 million. Non-discretionary items. These are items ultimately that we don't have, honestly, a whole lot of negotiating power with. These are things that are either contractual in nature or are things that we have in our buildings now that we need to ensure continue. First few of these, first one is a Virginia retirement system update, about $500,000 of expected increase from our VRS contributions. Healthcare increases of about $2.4 million, a 5% increase year over year. Typical year, we'll see 4.5%, given the impacts of the pandemic. We're going to lean into that a little bit more and ensure that we're covered and set aside 5% for our health care increases. Debt service. This is mortgage on, as it says here, school construction projects, leases, etc. Our current debt service is about 8% of our budget and about $58 million. This would increase that number from 58 to 60 as we continue to invest in new buildings, etc., to ensure that we're meeting the needs on the capital side of our organization. Utilities, up a little bit. You can see we've got a new school as part of this. We also see some normal year-over-year increases in utility costs. That's about $250,000. The next several, school counselors, I'll start here, $1.6 million. In this past fiscal year, we had added 22 counselors as the governor and the state pulled some funding out of their particular formulas, we chose to fund those with CARES dollars this year. It's about 1.6 million. Last year, about the same in the future years. These are people in our buildings really helping kids today. At some point, we're going to need to put those in our operating funds, and that point is, quite frankly, now. Instructional aides, a minor adjustment there, too, to continue to maintain service levels. The next slide will sound a lot like the counselor story. Nurses, we made a big push to ensure that we have a nurse in every school. That was about 15 nurses, 15. This would ensure that continues. And keep in mind, that was funded through CARES dollars in this fiscal year. We'll need to pay for that out of operation dollars at some point in this year's time to do that. ESL instructors, the same story as the counselors. These were 44 we put into the budget this past year to meet the needs of those English language learners, and that comes with about a $3 million price tag that we'll need to include in this budget as well. County transfers. Every 2 years, the county will look at the services they provide to CCPS. You can see them listed here, police, ground, accounting, audit, et cetera, and reassess the cost of those. This year, that cost came in at about $700,000 higher. Custodial costs. Josh Davis is here to talk a little bit about that as well. Our custodial team is doing a fantastic job meeting the higher standards of cleanliness. Part of that required some renegotiation and looking at different vendors. That comes with a cost. We are looking at about a $2 million increase next year for those improved custodial services. Every year we look to apply more funds to our essentially retirement program. It's about $500,000, $300,000 for Children's Services Act. Minor adjustments to grant funds. These are smaller. I'll start to move a little quicker. Some improvements to our HR software and ADA costs to ensure that we have the appropriate technology within our HR department, as well as to meet needs of folks who have ADA claims. We're putting in a new school. We need to meet some administrative duties with that by hiring a principal and clerical the year before they start. That's about $200,000. Some contractual increases for regional schools. You see Argis, Code RVA, Maggie Walker. We've typically under budgeted transportation overtime. We know it's there. We know there's shortages in drivers. We're actually going to budget that this time and not try to find the money elsewhere. It's about $600,000 price tag. Relatively minor increase to fuel and maintenance, but these things increase every year. We need to make sure we're covering that $100,000. One other really exciting thing that we did this past year with CARES dollars was buy something called the Tyler Drive tablets to put in each of our buses. This is really exciting technology that makes routing and a whole lot else of the transportation department run a lot smoother. That has an ongoing maintenance cost of about $165,000. And lastly, there's a state mandate for sanitary napkins in restrooms. Getting the hurry up note, a few other things to comment on enhancements here. I've talked about differentiated staffing and school-based funding already. That's about $4.5 million for those items. We also are looking to add school-based annual substitutes. This is a multi-year program to get at least one of those in each building. We're looking to start that process now at about $680,000. A number of other items here. Our payroll system is antiquated. We need to upgrade that. There are other needs that are listed here that I'll just flip through relatively quickly. You can see maintenance staffing, extending some contracts for special ed coordinators, other maintenance and construction staffing. My budget team needs SAT, PSAT for all. We've been providing that for the last few years to our students. That was through some generous donations from some outside parties. Should we want to continue that, that'll cost about $150,000. Some additional staffing in HR, technology, and other places. One thing I'll pause on this slide that I think is really important to talk about is the translation and interpretation. Shows up as $80,000. We have, as mentioned, a much bigger need for translation services given the rising ELL populations. We need to invest in more and better translation and interpretation. Some enhancements to our stipend program and some warehouse changes as well. Preventative maintenance and pay-as-you-go maintenance. We mentioned the aging infrastructure. This will enable us to continue to invest and improve both on the preventative and major side, our maintenance programs, and a handful of other enhancements that are worth looking at here, including other improvements to things like maintenance, HVAC repair, some textbook and digital curriculum enhancements as well, which are also really important. So you put that all together, that equals the $39.6 million deficit that we were talking about. We know we've got work to do. We know there are some fiscal realities in the county that we really need to be sure we are mindful of. We believe this is a needs-based budget, and we'll work with the board, Mr. Harder, as we go forward to ensure that the board's priorities, Dr. Doherty's priorities, are ultimately met. Again, the top priority remains the salary decompression. We'll talk about that a lot, I'm sure, in Q&A, so I won't spend any more time there. And lastly, just really quickly, a reminder, about 44% of our monies comes from the county, the rest from state, a little bit from local. And we are a people-heavy organization. Instruction accounts for about 69% of all spend, and salaries and benefits, the people costs, account for about 73.5%. So with all that, I think we've said this a few times, addressing teacher compensation is our number one priority and will continue to be. And with that, I'll turn it back to Tim for questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Meister. We started soliciting questions last night as we released the operating budget. We've got a number already submitted from the Matoaca district and from some other districts as well, and we've been taking copious notes, and I know Mr. Harder's been sitting beside me as well, monitoring the feed in Facebook, looking at feedback there. The first piece of information is just a quick clarification. We did have some folks who wanted to know how we chose the comparable localities that were in some of the charts that were shown earlier. And so I just want to let everybody know that the Virginia Department of Education led an efficiency study of Chesterfield County Public Schools probably about 10 years ago. And the state identified those as comparable localities that we should be comparing ourselves to. So we quite often get the question about Prince William and Virginia Beach and cost of living. These were comparable localities that were pointed out to us as organizations that we should hold ourselves up to. I think I would also acknowledge that that same study 10 years ago, when you look at the charts that Mr. Meister had showed, that same study 10 years ago reported that we needed to spend more on public education and that we were too efficient in that review. Before we get into questions, Lauren just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that while teachers don't do the teaching job for money, they still deserve to be fairly compensated. And I think that we've heard that throughout the case moving forward. So let's get into the questions. We'll start off with a good one right off the bat. Rebecca wants to know what we can do to help the Board of Supervisors better understand Chesterfield County Public Schools' needs.
I think it's a great question, and I do believe that they understand the needs. I just think that it would be helpful for our constituents to let the Board of Supervisors and the county executive know how important education is. You know, when you think about the growth that's occurring in Chesterfield County and the amount of construction that's going on, people are moving to Chesterfield County for the educational reasons. And we see that over and over again with the growth that's occurring. So I believe our constituents, everyone involved with Chesterfield County who believes in education, because it makes us a better society, just to let them know that they feel that education is important and they want to keep it a priority in our county.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty. This next question from James, or statement and a question, kind of dovetails with that. James is a teacher. He says that he reminds us that we proposed more money for our teachers last year. They didn't get it, and he's actually making less than he did last year. He wants to know what we can do to help reassure teachers that this is a priority, and what are we going to do to get it passed?
That's a really good question, and we failed last year. There were other things, other situations that had occurred, but we are making an unbelievable effort to keep this as a number one priority. And if you look at the opportunity that we have with 3 phases to look into this. Our goal is to make sure that our teachers are competitive in the market value and that they want to come here and they don't want to leave because of salaries in other school districts. And that's our commitment. And as I said yesterday to the board, if we do not reach the teacher compensation this year, I believe the budget would be a failure.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty.
And all I can promise him is that we are making every effort to be successful here.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty. Bob, Elaine would like some clarification on the 2% raise. Who does that go to within the school division if the budget's approved?
Yeah, the simple way to think about that is all other. So if you think about the folks that were included in the compensation plan, your teachers, paraprofessionals, school-based administrative positions would be covered by the study. The other 2% is to cover essentially all the other full-time staff. I mentioned a few examples: bus drivers, food service, central office, et cetera.
Thank you. Dr. Taylor, the question has come in about they'd like for us to elaborate on the nearly $25 million in savings and why that's not immediately in play for any of these initiatives, and talking about the one-time expenditure that turns into.
So when you're talking about budgets as large as ours, inevitably you will have small pockets of money left over in little accounts that combine to be a big sum at the end of the year. And we should have some funds left over each year, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1% to 3% of our budget annually. That's normal. That's actually expected. It would be poor financial management if we didn't have some fund balance at the end of every year. I will say that this past year, as we can all agree, was a little abnormal, and our savings were significant when we have things like fuel savings from buses not running on a regular pace, and so forth and so on. As we closed out the last bit of the last fiscal year, we did have a pretty significant savings that we could carry over. Unfortunately, that savings doesn't translate into an add to our budget year over year because it's not something that we can count on every year thereafter. So what we have is this big chunk of money that could be used for one-time use. And so good financial practice would be to use things that you could use annually as part of that base budget and not necessarily the things that are left over in fund balance.
Thank you, Mr. Meister. Wendy has acknowledged that no one is more deserving at this point in time than teachers, and if we can't find a way this year with additional revenue, we need to look at cuts. Can you talk a little bit about the process in terms of budget development and how each department presents and the scrubbing that is done prior to the budget actually being presented?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tim, for the question. The process actually starts in the fall. So we started to look at each individual, some of the examples are across the screen here, individual chiefs' budgets. We would take a look at what they have spent over the last several years, what they had budgeted this previous year, how they're trending in the current year across each of their individual departments and line items, and do a really close and tight scrub on each of those numbers as, quite frankly, the starting point. As we looked through that, we identified opportunities for improvements and changes in budgets, et cetera, as we looked at that, and that really gives myself, the budget staff, comfort that that base budget is fair and reasonable. You don't see a major adjustment year over year in that because we do this process every year. We scrub out certain items that are needed. There are a few items that may need to be adjusted the other way. That all tends to wash itself out into a pretty neutral space. Going forward, as we look at this, I welcome anyone to take a look or understand, the board or whomever, to challenge any of those base assumptions. I think we've done a nice job of scrubbing to make sure that there are no, what I'll just call low-hanging fruit in terms of cuts, but what is in the budget are things that are being done today. I'm open to suggestions if there are things that are being done today that we think we, quite frankly, don't need to do or the ROI isn't there, but as part of those scrubs, we do look for those opportunities.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Bullis, if I could add to that, and I would point our viewing audience tonight, if you would go to my chesterfieldschools.com, there's a nice budget printout that is available for you in PDF form for you to take a look at, which has some of this details. And I just want to draw our viewing audience's attention to the second page that's inside. You've got all these lovely pie charts in here. And when we look at potential cuts for the school system, and that's not part of the dialogue tonight, and we want to be very clear about that, that is not part of the dialogue, you see that in the lower pie chart, that salary and benefits are 73.5% of our budget, that our operating expenses, that's keeping the lights on and keeping the buses running, is about 16% of our budget, and that debt service, just paying the mortgage on the facilities that we use, is 8%. That leaves very little wiggle room beyond that. So any kind of reduction that we would have to make would have to come in the form of personnel because we are so lean. We are a large school system, and the type of money that we're talking about seems like a mega millions type of dollar figure, and it is. But the reality is, compared to other school systems of relative size, we really are operating on a shoestring budget, and if we were going to make reductions, we would also be making reductions in service to the community.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Before we get to the next question, Sharon just chimed in and said her son graduates from college this year and wants to come to Chesterfield to teach. Please approve this budget. We'd love for him to come to teach in Chesterfield tomorrow. So if he would like to apply, please go ahead and send his application in that way. Mr. Meister, Darcy wants to know why there's not much federal funding available in our budget.
Thank you for that question. This reflects the operating budget. I mentioned that there are a few other buckets of funds that aren't captured here. A very small piece of the federal budget that we get is included in the operations fund. We have a separate grant fund that does have federal dollars in it to fund things like Title I, Title IV, et cetera. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but that shows up in a different funding source. That's also where a lot of the CARES dollars that we've heard a lot of discussion about, that lands in that budget. And in future discussions with the board, we'll bring that piece of the budget forward as well.
Great, thank you. Dr. Pope, some instruction. We have a couple of parents who've written in wanting to know about the budget that we use for special education to serve our students with special needs. Can you talk a little bit overall about the budget that we use to support public education for students with special needs?
Absolutely. So first, I think it's important to realize that the budget we've been talking about this evening is a budget that impacts instructionally all of our students. And our special education students are part of all of our students. So whenever we talk about how we spend CARES dollars, what we have allocated out of the budget that we're proposing, we first and foremost look at what are the instructional benefits, because they do extend to all of our students. Beyond that, I think this question that we are receiving from parents is how are you going to help my student? My student has special needs. I feel like COVID has really hit my child hard in the learning area, and what are we going to do as a school district? I will say that we always go back to the IEP team. We look at what the VDOE is recommending right now, which they do have documents out that suggest or recommend to school systems what are COVID recovery strategies and services that we should be considering. Our IEP teams will be looking at those documents, following those suggestions, following those recommendations. And just as it is with any student in Chesterfield County Public Schools, it's an individual decision. We use key indicators with our students quite often. That could be PALS assessments, that could be MAPS assessments, that could be our classroom teachers and what they're assessing. With any student, we use data indicators that are appropriate for that particular student, and we look at where is this individual student. I think more than ever, as we resume face-to-face instruction, 5-day-a-week instruction, we're going to see students coming back to us that have more diverse needs than we've ever seen before. And we need to meet each and every student where they are instructionally. So we're going to look at those data points. We're going to figure out the needs and the supports. We have everything that Bob just presented when he talked about differentiating. We differentiate staffing. We differentiate supports for our schools that need that. We also do that for our students. When we spend CARES money, when we spend our normal allocated money, We look at what software might most appropriately serve students. And quite honestly, we do expense software, for example, and learning supplies. Sometimes they're paper tangible supplies that benefit students in our special needs arena. So it's about meeting the individual where they are, and it's certainly about expensing our dollars to move every student forward. And that's what we take pride in, and that's where we see our schools so successful. And of course, we thank our teachers for their lift in that.
Thank you, Dr. Pope. Mr. Davis, have a couple of questions here on the Google form about PPE and equipment for next year. Let's touch on, first of all, just to clarify to everybody that we do have PPE for this year, but what are we planning on for next year?
Thank you, Mr. Bullis. Yes, we've went to great lengths to ensure that all of our staff has adequate PPE as we've reopened schools first back in the fall, and now we're getting ready to begin again next week. I'm talking about a variety of different masks, gloves, face shields, wipes in the classroom, other supplies to ensure that we keep a disinfected learning environments in place. So for next year, we don't really have a crystal ball, but we have to assume that what we'll call the post-COVID environment is going to continue, that we'll still need to do social distancing, that we'll still need to have many of these same PPE and other supplies in place. And a lot of the funding that we used came from the CARES dollars. And so we have a two-tact approach. We know that the federal government may be sending us some more money. Mr. Meister's gotten a pretty good indication of the sum that's going to be, so we'll spend that money if necessary. But I also have, as one of our enhancements to the operating budget, a kind of a placeholder of $1 million to ensure that we've got a second source of money in case that those federal funds don't come through. So again, we anticipate those demands to continue. We're going to keep the warehouse stocked, and I'm confident that funds will be available.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Meister, Francine was going back to the one-time savings and asked if we had looked at or considered using that one-time savings to purchase some of what would appear to be one-time purchases in the list that you shared a bit ago, specifically software, that type of thing. Is that a possibility, and can you talk about any ongoing costs that might exist with any of those purchases?
So it is always an opportunity to look at that one-time money for one-time purchases. As Dr. Taylor talked about earlier, that would, in most scenarios, that's the best use of those funds. As we look at this $24 million that we have available now, we must look at that from two standpoints, right? One is, what is the best use of this funds today? What is the best use of this funds going forward? Knowing how important the compensation study is, for example, we want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can with the support of the county to ensure that that first and foremost gets funded. And if that means we need to put a down payment, as I've been calling it, that on the compensation study with some of this, I think that's totally appropriate. As you look at some of those other one-time items in the budget, I think it's a totally reasonable ask to say, hey, can we dedicate some of the one-time money for those opportunities, provided we don't do that at the expense of the compensation in the pay study.
Thank you.
Mr. Bullis.
Yes, sir.
Just if I may, one of the things to remember is that we are required, we have to give the money back to the county, and then we have to get approval to spend that money. So we just can't spend the money how we want to. We have to get approval from the county to spend this money. And again, we are trying to keep teacher compensation on the front line here.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty. Mr. Meister, if you can go to the slide that talks about per pupil costs for administration. And while you do that, I'm going to pose a question to Dr. Taylor. Dr. Taylor, Pam writes that CCPS has an allocation issue, not so much a budget issue. Administration is far too top-heavy. More dollars need to go to teachers and other school building support personnel like janitors, food service staff, secretaries, and bus drivers. What are we going to do to improve pay for these positions? So if you can talk a little bit about the chart that Mr. Meister's just put up, and again, look at phase 4 of a compensation study, what would that entail?
So I absolutely agree with half of that, and that is that our folks are not compensated adequately. In terms of allocation, though, we clearly put the majority of our funds where we know that it can do the best, and that is in instruction. So as you look through the slide deck that you can find at mychesterfieldschools.com and that you saw this evening, you'll see that the majority of our per pupil expenditure goes to instruction, and then followed by operations. And the very last and the very smallest part of our budget goes to administration, attendance, and health, and part of that being supervision. Compared in the market that we use for our comparables, everybody from Henrico to Hanover to Richmond to Virginia Beach and Prince William County, all of which are substantially higher in terms of their administration. We do have an issue in administration, and it is not that we are top-heavy, and the data certainly supports this. It's that our folks don't have enough support so that they can support our teachers. It's important to not necessarily pit different employees in the school system against one another, just like we would not want to pit ourselves against our very well-deserving public safety employees who are also seeking a well-deserved compensation raise in county government, but that rather we're all a part of one team, and that one CCPS team takes a lot of work from everybody to help make the classroom instruction happen. It's not just the classroom teacher, but it's the principal and assistant principal behind the scenes that help support that instruction. It's the instructional designer who helps with the creation of innovative lessons. It's the teaching assistant who helps to monitor behavioral concerns in a classroom. It's the bus drivers who help make sure that our students get to and from school safety. It's our nutrition workers who provide nutritious meals to our children, 3 million of which since March of this year, meals have been delivered to our community and to our children. It's everybody, and it's not just a handful of people in the organization that have high salaries. I can attest to you that our salaries at every level and every part of the organization are lacking. Our salary study proves as much. We highly encourage our friends to look online, and there are hot links even within this document that take you to a third-party independent study of our compensation. And even though our compensation study only looked at about 5,000 of our 8,000 employees, all of the trends are the same. All of them reflect the same thing, that not only are our salaries compressed and have been compressed over the last decade and some change, but also that they are not market competitive. And both of those are challenges. I think back to James's question, and he was the first person to ask a question in tonight's forum. James, thank you for sticking with us last year. We know that flat funding our compensation last year was a tough choice. It was a struggle for everybody in this organization, and we appreciate you sticking with us through this tough time, and we hope that your loyalty is rewarded this year and that you are compensated in a way that is fair for the market and for the work that we do to serve the children of this county. So thank you, James, and thank you to all of our other teachers who are out there working very hard and staff members who support those teachers.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Mr. Harder, Erin points out that we haven't heard from you yet, so she's got a good one for you.
Okay,
And she's got 4 likes with it, too.
Well, great.
Dr. Doherty, she writes, Dr. Doherty spoke to how schools, how constituents can advocate for schools to the Board of Supervisors. What is the working relationship between the school board and the Board of Supervisors? I would like to hear Mr. Harder's perspective. Great,
I'd love to give it. So thanks for asking that question. I think that we have a very good and open relationship with our members on the Board of Supervisors. I'm in constant contact with members from our Board of Supervisors almost daily. They understand the challenges that we have, and I understand the challenges that they have. We do know that, at certain times, there's things that we may not agree on, but one thing we do agree on is we want to make sure that Chesterfield continues to be a first-choice community. Last year, we had a number of challenges that came up, and you're right. And the question from James about making less money this year than he did last year. And I'd like to echo what Dr. Taylor said. Thank you for sticking with us. But this year's changed a little bit. This year, we've taken the time to step back, as was requested by the Board of Supervisors, to take a look at a pay study. That pay study came back, and it does tell us we have an issue with what we pay our teachers and our other employees here in the county. So I echo Dr. Doherty and everyone else up here and my fellow board members that teacher decompression needs to be our #1 priority this year. And we are going to try our hardest to make that happen. We are communicating, we are working collaboratively with the Board of Supervisors. We do know that there will be some give and take on both sides, but we're up to the challenge, and I'm confident that we're going to be able to make this happen. This is our #1 priority. So I am committed to working with them as much as we can to make sure that this is a reality for our teachers, because our teachers deserve it.
Thank you, Mr. Harder. I'm not sure if this would go to Dr. Pope or perhaps Dr. Taylor or Mr. Meister. Kelly's written in and wants to ask about a budget for this summer for summer school, and what are our plans for summer school?
There we go. Thanks for asking a question about summer school, because we're getting ready to give a report to the school board. We are planning to take our CARES ESSER 2 money and allocate for the next 3 summers, summer school for kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And we are excited about this. We are just finalizing the buildings that we can use that aren't going to have new HVAC systems put in. But the staff's working very hard, and we have a report coming to the board in March, and we're going to share our summer school opportunities. We do start school a little earlier this year. We start August 23rd but, for 21-22. But we have a plan to provide summer school and enrichment for all of our students, and there will be no charge for summer school as we look to making sure that all of our students start a recovery of learning. And we did say in our plan when we did the restart that we looked at a 3-year summer school plan of intensity to making sure our students got the educational needs, look at the educational needs they have, look at some of the gaps we have, and to make sure that we can work with our students in small groups and make sure they're ready for the next school year.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty. Dr. Pope, question from Cammie. High school social studies across the county has been advocating for textbooks for a number of years. It's been made clear that AP and IB courses are the only courses that will be getting textbooks. In light of the goal of equity by this board and central office, how is the school division going to bring more equity to educational resource spending?
Okay, great question, one we've received before. For anyone who maybe hasn't been in Chesterfield for a number of years, just a little historical perspective. We had an extensively long strategic plan before our current plan, Imagine Tomorrow, and that previous plan was called Design for Excellence. At the point that that plan was implemented, our district made a strategic, intentional shift to move from paper textbooks that we were purchasing on cycles, sometimes 7 to 10 years in length, to digital curriculum. Since that time, we have been investing more in digital curriculum. It has actually been between 12 and 18 years since we last bought a district-wide textbook. And that depends on the subject matter, quite honestly, because they were on a cyclic rotation. We are required by our governing agencies, such as AP and IB, to purchase textbooks for those subjects. That is why some of those subjects still do receive paper textbooks. But the rest of our county, we have converted with this philosophical shift to digital curriculum. It was an instructional decision, and certainly our investment in devices and our network infrastructure, they all support this decision to move towards digital. There are benefits in digital. I know, I was a language arts teacher. Sometimes I just want to pick up a book, but digital curriculum provides us the most current, up-to-date curriculum that we can offer our students. It is media rich, and I know what I prefer. I'm not going to tell you my age, but folks of my generation may like a book. But think of our students. Our students like a media-rich learning opportunity, and we can't give them that in a textbook. Textbook adoption, quite honestly, would run us anywhere from $300,000 to buy a health textbook for an entire grade level across our division to sometimes $2.5 or $3 million. And those are like 2016, 2018 prices. So if you look at what textbooks would cost us to go back to paper textbooks, the expense would be exceedingly great. We would have to get back on the rotation cycle, and quite honestly, it takes us in the opposite direction of the recommendations for the Virginia Department of Education. They have an LMS, we have an LMS, they promote digital curriculum, we promote digital curriculum, so we have to be that school district that keeps in step and with our Virginia Department of Education and quite honestly our world, and it is digital these days.
Thank you, Dr. Pope. Mr. Davis, question coming back to you again about personal protective equipment and how we're looking at next year's allocations. Several questions within. Is there money allocated for temperature check devices to help make schools safer? So let's bounce back to why that may be a false positive or a false sense of security. Will the county purchase desks that enable all classrooms to more effectively social distance? And will we look at outdoor classrooms and eating areas to make schools safer as we look towards next year and if we have to battle this virus again?
Okay, I think I heard at least 3 questions there, Mr. Bullis. In regards to temperature check, we are counting on our employees and our families to check the temperature of them, whether it's yourself or your student, every day. And we do not intend to buy temperature check devices at our doorways. We believe that there's false positives that can occur, and we may mistakenly identify someone as being sick when they're not. If they are sick, we will certainly send them to a clinic, especially as things change during the day where the temperatures can be taken, and our nurses can make a quick assessment in regards to whether an individual needs health care or might possibly be a candidate for a COVID test. The second question, I believe, had to do with a desk. We have adequate furniture. If anything, we've been storing desks and putting them aside because we've had this hybrid learning environment, and so we haven't needed to have as many desks in the room because we were accomplishing the social distancing, which we will continue as we bring students back. So the demand for the desk is rising as we've invited all of our students to come back 5 days a week. We have been coordinating with principals and schools to determine if they need furniture. We deliver it out of our warehouse. We do have some stockpiles because fortunately we've been opening 2 or 3 brand new schools each year, and those schools get brand new furniture, so their leftover furniture, goes into our warehouse, and I feel very confident that we have adequate desks in particular. And then the final question about outdoor learning. We do have some schools that have some nice courtyards and so forth, even some of our oldest ones, like Grange Hall Elementary, where I've been a couple of times. And so our faculty is looking for those opportunities where we do have those learning spaces. And certainly as we design our future buildings, because we hope to build more buildings in the future, we're not addressing CIP directly tonight. There'll be discussions of that in the future. But we're certainly looking at new designs that will provide more learning spaces that not only have great ventilation inside the building, but will provide opportunities where we can have instruction outside that would include technology and additional shelter. So there's many, many possibilities, both in the short range and the long range. And we want to keep our students in a healthy environment, and sometimes that outdoor opportunity is in place at certain schools. I'll certainly acknowledge that there are some schools that have less of those opportunities, but we look for those. We've had some projects to add outdoor learning spaces at several of our schools. Some of those have been service projects that have been offered by the community. So again, we're always willing to partner, whether it's with an organization that wants to add some additional spaces outside. We've got schools such as Crestwood that's getting rebuilt that has a great greenhouse that we're trying to add that will provide those types of opportunities. So I think that's about it for that subject.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Harder, I know you touched on at least a part of this in your earlier comments, specifically referencing compensation. Carrie is interested in knowing what your priorities are for this budget.
So my number one priority for this budget is to get our teachers compensated. That's my number one. Our number two is to make sure that as we start to bring students back in, that we make sure that we have services available to them. We make sure that we have those supports available to them. So those are my two main goals. But my number one goal is that we fix our teacher decompression.
Thank you. One of the other priorities that we put in our budget, Dr. Taylor, was looking at equity and differentiated funding. Kim has asked how we would expect schools to spend this additional funding, school-based administration, to spend this additional funding if it were approved.
So taking a closer look at this particular proposal, and you can see it again outlined in the online PDF that you can get off of mychesterfieldschools.com. There's a couple of different ways that principals certainly could direct these funds. These would go directly to the school in terms of what principals could use at their discretion. You'll notice that there are some categories in which we are allocating those funds, and there is the expectation that our schools apply those funds to help the students in which they are receiving those funds. So these would be student-facing funds and directed to student improvement of academic learning and student support, and that is the intention of those funds, but they would be at the school principal's direction. We honor the fact that every one of our schools is different, and each one of our schools has unique needs, and each one of our sub-communities has unique needs. And this is one of the ways that we can do that by putting the principal in the driver's seat, working with their families and teachers to drive where those funds can be put to the highest and best use.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Meister, back to you. There's a question about the CARES Act money that we've spent this year and that we would be looking at spending some sort of equivalent of next year. The question makes a statement that is supposed to target special education students. What are the parameters related to this funding?
So CARES funding is there's a few different types of CARES funding, each with its own unique nuance. I'm not going to go into all the details, but generally speaking, the CARES funding is really there to address what I'll just call sort of COVID and pandemic related needs. That can be special education, that can be needs for remote learning, for improving transportation, improving building ventilation. Dr. Doherty talked about using some of the new funds that we are awaiting for essentially the recovery of learning, the summer school. All these are uses of funds. There's a list of 18 or 20 different things. 100% special education is one of those things, as are unique needs for other learners as well. And I think Dr. Pope talked a little bit about the needs of special education earlier, and I'll point back to you if you have anything else to add on that. But
Good. Okay. Mr. Meister, if you could go to slide 38, I'm going to toss this question to Dr. Taylor, and we'll do a quick time check. We've got a little less than 10 minutes left. We want to be respectful of everybody's time tonight. Dr. Taylor, the question's been asked by Elaine if this is about the 3-year process for fixing compensation. Just to clarify, it is not addressed only with year one. This is a 3-year proposal.
Absolutely, and thank you for the question, Elaine. If you may recall, for our folks watching at home, this was an initial proposal that was made last year, and we proposed $35 million to decompress the salaries of all of the employees in Chesterfield County Public Schools. That did not get approved in the budget last year, and as a result, we did a third-party salary study. That third-party salary study looked at only 5,000 of our 8,000 plus employees, and of those a little over 5,000 employees, about 4,700 of them were on a teacher type scale, and 4,100 of those on the teacher type scale are actual classroom teachers. We have a whole host of other positions like coordinators of special education, counselors, librarians, and so forth and so on that are on a teacher variant scale. And we looked at how we might be able to accomplish not just one, but a couple of goals. The first goal would be, how can we decompress those scales like how they have been compressed over the last 10 years. Over time, we've just added percentages. We haven't added steps. It's a little bit of a misnomer when you take a look at our salary scale today, because it's not really a salary scale, it's a placement scale. And you compare that to going to what we are recommending now, which is a true salary scale where employees would progress through steps along that salary scale over time. The best way to accomplish this would be to do this as an iterative process, because the total cost of this would be over $45 million. And the stages that the consultant that did our salary study recommended was the first phase, which was to decompress the salary scale. The second phase, which would be to increase market competitiveness. And the third phase, to optimize our market competitiveness. So really, this is more encompassing than what we proposed last year. It does take a little bit longer period of time, but it accomplishes more goals than what we set forward last year. We really just had one goal with last year's proposal, which was to decompress the scales. And yes, that would have had a significant impact on our staff salaries, but that really wasn't the big picture. The big picture also takes a look at how we can become more market competitive, and how the difference between becoming a teacher in, say, Henrico versus a teacher in Chesterfield, that pay differential is negligible. And that's really what our goal is. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. In these last 5 minutes, I'm going to turn to our superintendent and our school board member with two final questions. Dr. Doherty, you've used some pretty strong language about the budget, referencing last year is not successful and saying this year won't be successful if staff compensation is not addressed. Why is that so important to you?
Education is in the people business. And if we're not willing to compensate our teachers, then it makes it almost impossible to prepare the future of our young men and women, because our greatest asset, which are our teachers, will be leaving us. And if we want to see our children be the leaders of tomorrow, then we must deal with the facts of today, which have been over a 12-year issue. And that is, we must pay our teachers the market value, and that they're willing to stay here because we give them great learning environments. They love working with their colleagues. We have outstanding administrators in the schools. We make every effort to put more support in the schools. As we notice, we put over 200 more people from the district office back in the schools over the past 18 months. But if we say that education is important, if we say that our children are important, then we must deal with the people that teach them every day. Because everyone in life has had a teacher to get to where they wanted to end up in their career. Everyone listening had a teacher, no matter what profession they're encountered in. And so we must stop neglecting this. We must stop passing the buck, because it will only get more expensive. And we just have to, I hate to say this, we have to man up and do what's right for our professionals in Chesterfield County.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty. Mr. Harder, last words to you. What would you like to see and hear from your constituents over the next couple of weeks as you all work to approve a budget to send to the Board of Supervisors?
Well, thank you, Tim. Over the next couple weeks, myself and the rest of the board are going to have to take a deep dive and to really look, because we know our priority is this teacher decompression. It has been plaguing CCPS for a long time, and it's time that we can fix this. We need to be able to keep the teachers we have and attract the best talent. And if we are not a competitor pay-wise, we're not going to be able to do that. People come to this county for our schools. That is one of the driving forces. If you go out on the street and you talk to people, one of the main reasons people say they're here is for the great schools. So we got to reward the great teachers that make our schools great. What I would like members of the Matoaca District to do is to just continue to support me as we move through the next couple weeks. We are working collaboratively with the Board of Supervisors to make adjustments on different things. The Board of Supervisors is not an infinite amount of money, we know that. But we do think that we could make some positive changes here that are really going to affect our county long-term. So I'm going to continue working hard, keep dialogue open to try to make this happen for our teachers.
Thank you, Mr. Harder. We're coming up almost to the minute on 8 o'clock. We want to thank the panel for joining us tonight. I know it's been a long day for you, just like it's been a long day for everybody who's been working today in the school system and outside the school system. To our community residents, those of you who joined us tonight, those of you who will watch us later on as this is re-aired on Facebook, we appreciate your time and attention tonight. We appreciate your willingness to take a step forward and to listen to the needs of the school division and to listen to how they can be funded. We look forward to partnering with you as we continue to have this discussion about the future of Chesterfield County and the future of Chesterfield County Public Schools. And with that, we appreciate your time and attention tonight. Thank you for everything that you do to support our students, our staff, and our schools. Have a great evening.